At the hotel, John met a guy who didn't ask for anything. He just listened. One evening of conversation changed more than years of silence. This isn't about romance. It's about how sometimes a stranger can bring you back to yourself. He didn't forget my birthday. He just didn't check the date. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not snapped, not broke, but quietly turned off. I didn't even feel hurt. I just sat with the realization, cold and clear, that someone who once memorized every inch of me no longer remembered the basics. Not because he didn't love me, necessarily, but because he didn't try to. When we arrived in Miami, the sun was setting low, painting the buildings gold. Alex didn't notice. His AirPods were in before the car even stopped. "Yeah, I'll loop you in," he muttered, waving at me to grab his laptop bag. He walked ahead into the lobby, still on the call, gesturing toward the bellhop, like he was giving stage directions. I followed, rolling both our suitcases, keeping a polite smile on my face for the staff while wondering if I was already invisible. At the check-in desk, the woman asked, "Just the two of you?" I hesitated. My mouth moved before my brain. "Yes," I said, "just us." She gave me the kind of soft, professional smile designed for tired travelers. I envied her for being a stranger. It's easier to fake interest when you only meet someone once. In the elevator, Alex ended his call and finally looked at me. "You okay?" he asked like a reflex. Not curiosity, just checking a box. I nodded. I didn't say, "You haven't really looked at me in weeks," or "I miss when you used to hold my hand," without thinking. I just nodded because I didn't want to ruin the illusion before we even got to the room. The room was clean, sleek, over-designed in that expensive way that's meant to be neutral for everyone and personal to no one. Alex tossed his bag on the chair, opened his laptop, and said, "They moved the deck review to tomorrow morning. I'll need a few hours tonight." I said, "Of course." I always said of course. It had become a habit like brushing my teeth. Agree, step back, let him work. Be understanding. Be patient. Be proud. Be quiet. I sat by the window, watching the pool below as the lights turned on. Families with kids, couples holding hands, a group of women laughing over wine. I wondered when we stopped doing that, when holding hands turned into scrolling beside each other, when laughing together became rare enough to feel like a holiday. "Want to grab a drink downstairs?" I asked. It was a small ask. Just one drink. 1 hour. He glanced at me, then at his screen. "Maybe later. Let me just finish this section. It won't take long." I said, "Okay." Then I left. The bar was dim, quiet, with low music and bartenders who made too much eye contact. I sat near the back, sipping something overpriced and unremarkable. I watch people exist. There's something sobering about watching strangers be happy when you can't remember what that feels like. I didn't stay long, just long enough to feel the loneliness settle somewhere deeper than I wanted it to. When I came back upstairs, he was still working. The glow of his laptop lit half his face. He didn't look up. I asked if he wanted anything from room service. "I'm good," he said. "Thanks." I nodded. Ordered food, for one. Ate in silence. We didn't touch that night. Didn't even face the same direction in bed. His breathing was slow and steady, like he was asleep inside a life he no longer questioned. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like a guest in a place I used to call home. The next morning, he left early for his meetings. I woke up alone, the imprint of his pillow still faint but fading. There was a note on the nightstand. "Back by lunch. Don't wait." I didn't. I walked the city by myself, saw palm trees bend with the breeze, listened to the ocean and let its sound fill a silence that had started to grow inside me like mold. When he returned, he told me about the meeting, how well it went, how impressed the investors were. I smiled, nodded, told him that was great. He didn't ask what I did that morning, didn't notice the faint sunburn on my shoulders or the small shell I had found and kept in my pocket for no real reason. He just kept talking, as if I was part of the furniture that now came with pre-installed reactions. We went to the pool together that afternoon. I thought maybe we'd talk, maybe it would feel like before. But he brought his phone, held it in one hand while sipping iced tea, read emails, answered Slack messages, laughed at something someone sent. I asked what was funny. He said, "Inside joke." You wouldn't get it. That stung. Not because I wanted to be in on the joke, but because he didn't even think to include me. He used to. Once. Later, I asked if we could do dinner together. Just us. Somewhere off the resort. Yeah, he said. Sounds good. But 20 minutes before our reservation, he got a call. Crap, they want me to jump on this strategy session real quick. I won't be long. He was 3 hours late. I ate alone. Again. When he came back, he looked guilty for a second, but it passed. Sorry, he said. You know how it is? I said, of course. What else could I say? I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to beg. I just wanted to be seen. The third morning, I didn't suggest anything. I didn't ask for time. I didn't check his schedule. I just watched him move through the room like a man on a business trip who had somehow brought his relationship along as excess luggage. At lunch, I finally asked, do you still want this? He looked confused. Want what? This. Us. He blinked, leaned back. Why would you ask that? Because you haven't really looked at me in days. He rubbed his eyes. I'm just overwhelmed. It's a lot, all of this. I know it's a lot, I said, but I'm not one of your projects. I'm supposed to be your person. He said nothing. That silence said more than anything else could have. I left the table before the check came. Walked back to the room. Packed my beach bag. Sat by the water for hours. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just stared at the horizon, at the line between sea and sky, and wondered how something could be both beautiful and empty at the same time. When I got back, he was asleep again. Half-dressed, laptop on his chest like a shield. We didn't talk that night. We lay in the dark, our backs not quite touching, the space between us full of words we no longer bothered to say. That was when I knew. We were still together, but I was already alone. The hardest part wasn't the fading love. It was the part of me that kept waiting for him to notice, to ask what was wrong, to care. But he didn't, and I couldn't wait anymore. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I finally realized that love alone isn't enough when it's not returned. Sometimes it takes being completely ignored to realize just how badly you needed someone to choose you again. Not out of habit, but out of desire. He never did. John hadn't planned on going back to the lounge. He didn't even like the lounge. It always smelled like overused citrus cleaner and stale upholstery, and the music felt like it was picked by an algorithm trying to guess what tired guests might find vaguely relaxing. But that evening, after another long hour of pretending to scroll his phone while Alex typed furiously across the room, he walked out without a word. It was the kind of exit that wasn't meant to be noticed. And it wasn't. Alex didn't ask where he was going. Didn't even look up. John stepped into the lounge like someone trying to step out of his own mind. He bypassed the bar, the TVs, the clusters of people laughing too loudly, and settled in a corner seat where the lighting was soft enough not to expose anything he didn't want to show. He didn't order anything. Just sat there, listening to the hum of meaningless chatter, the clink of glasses, the occasional laugh that didn't belong to anyone he cared about. It was background noise. Familiar but distant. That's when he noticed the boy. At first, it was just movement. The subtle rhythm of a pencil sliding across a napkin. The way the boy sat curled into the armchair, legs tucked under, posture tight but contained. He wasn't scrolling or sipping. He wasn't trying to be seen. That's what made John see him. The boy was drawing. Not with fancy tools. Just a hotel napkin and a basic pencil already dulled. The sketch wasn't of anything specific. Not people. Not places. Just shapes. Moods, maybe. John couldn't quite tell. But there was something in the way the boy's hand moved, slow, intentional, quiet, that pulled him in. He hadn't realized he was staring until the boy looked up. Their eyes met. The boy didn't flinch, didn't smile. He just held the gaze for a moment longer than expected, then looked back down at his napkin. John cleared his throat, more to ground himself than to speak. Are those free? He asked, gesturing at the napkin. The boy gave the slightest curve of a smile. I think so, he said. No one stopped me yet. John stood up and walked over, nodding at the empty seat across from him. Mind if I? The boy shrugged. It's a free country. John sat. It felt strange at first, like intruding on something private, but the boy didn't seem bothered. What are you drawing? John asked. The boy tilted the napkin toward him. The figures were faceless. Shadows, silhouettes. Distorted. They looked like people you might pass on the street, but never remember. How it feels to be around people, the boy said. John leaned in. Which is? Loud, the boy said. But also lonely. John nodded. Yeah, that sounds about right. They sat in silence for a while. Not awkward. Just still. I'm John, he said eventually. The boy hesitated. Then said, Logan, how long are you staying? John asked. Just a few nights. Needed a break from my house. John studied him more carefully now. Logan was young. Maybe 19. But not in a fragile way. He looked like someone who had already lived through too much for his age. Your house? John asked. Yeah. Parents fighting. Pretending not to. You know the type. John let out a breath. Yeah, I do. What about you? Logan asked. You here alone? John hesitated. Not exactly. Logan looked at him, eyes sharp. But you feel like you are. John didn't answer. He didn't need to. The boy saw through him too quickly. You always talk to strangers? John asked, half smiling. Only the ones who look like they need it more than I do. That caught John off guard. He laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that had dust on it for not being used. You're not wrong, he said. Logan folded the napkin carefully and slid it into his hoodie pocket. Then he stood, stretching a little. Thanks for saying something, he said. Most people just stare and pretend they're not. Thanks for answering, John replied. Logan paused. You should come back down later. It's quieter around midnight. The pool's empty. Good place to think. Then he walked away. No wave. No goodbye. Just gone. John sat there for a while longer. Long enough for the buzz of the lounge to return to full volume. Long enough to feel the emptiness again. Then he stood and left. Back in the room, Alex was still typing. He glanced up briefly. You disappeared. I went for a walk. Alex didn't ask where. John didn't tell him. They barely spoke that night. Slept facing opposite directions. Just after 11:30, John got out of bed. He didn't say why. Alex didn't ask. John took the elevator down. The pool was deserted. Quiet. The water didn't shimmer. It just sat there, waiting. Logan was sitting at the edge, legs in the water, head tilted back, eyes closed. John walked over slowly. You found it, Logan said without opening his eyes. I wasn't looking, John replied. Logan opened his eyes. That's how it works. John sat beside him. The tiles were cold under his palms. The silence wasn't heavy. It was a pause between breaths, between thoughts. They didn't speak for a while. Just sat. Then John said, My partner is upstairs. Asleep, I think. He hasn't said good night in a long time. Not really. Logan nodded. He doesn't look at you. You noticed? Logan turned to face him. You've looked at me more tonight than he's looked at you all week. John didn't know what to say. He laughed again, quietly. You noticed too much. Logan shrugged. Only what matters. A breeze passed through. The kind that doesn't move anything but your thoughts. John rubbed his hands together. Why are you really here? Logan hesitated. Because I couldn't stay there. At home. The walls were screaming. No one said anything, but everything was breaking. And I was just there. I get that, John said. I came here hoping to remember something. Something I think I forgot. What's that? What it feels like to matter. Logan looked at him for a long time. You do, he said. You don't even know me. I don't have to. John swallowed. His throat felt tight. I'm not trying to make this weird, Logan said, voice softer now. I talk to a lot of people. Most of them talk back, but they don't really say anything. You did. I haven't said much. You didn't need to. They sat there, knees barely touching. Do you ever feel, John began, like you're in a room full of people and somehow still disappearing? Logan nodded. All the time. They looked at the water. I don't want anything from you, Logan said suddenly. Not really. I just want you to know that someone sees you. Not what you do. Not who you are to someone else. Just you. John didn't answer. He couldn't. He just breathed. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. That evening, John found himself walking toward the pool again. Not because he planned to. Not even because he knew Logan would be there. But the silence upstairs had grown too loud. The kind of silence that doesn't just sit in the room. It presses against your skin, climbs into your chest, and lingers behind your eyes. He passed through the lobby, nodded at the night manager who didn't seem to recognize him despite this being the third night in a row, and exited to the patio where the pool sat in a rectangle of weak light and soft shadow. There was no breeze, only the subtle motion of water curling at the edges from the filter's current. Logan was there. He was sitting at the edge of the pool, his feet in the water again, still as stone. He didn't look up when John approached, didn't speak. Just sat there like he belonged in the quiet. John walked over and lowered himself down beside him, letting his legs hang into the cool water. They sat without a greeting, but it didn't feel impolite. It felt like continuation, like the conversation from the night before hadn't ended, just paused. After a while, Logan spoke. "You came back. I wasn't sure I would," John said. "But you did." John looked out over the water. The room felt too small. "Even though it's not," Logan said. "Funny how that works." John chuckled, the sound barely audible. "Is this where you go to not disappear?" Logan shook his head. "It's where I come to let the weight settle." They didn't speak for a moment. The water lapped against their ankles gently, like it was listening too. Then Logan said, "My dad used to sit by the pool when things got bad. He'd never say anything, just light a cigarette, stare at the water, and wait for something to change." "Did it?" John asked. "No," Logan said. "But I think sitting there made him feel like he had control. Like if he just kept being still long enough, life would get the message and behave." John nodded slowly. "Sometimes I think I confuse stillness with safety." Logan looked over. "And it's not the same thing," John said. He took a breath. "I've been with Alex for 6 years. We met at a conference. He was bold, confident, knew exactly who he was. And I was just drawn to that. I thought if I stood close enough to someone like him, maybe I'd finally feel steady." Logan said nothing, but didn't look away. "I used to think love was about admiration," John continued. "Being proud of someone, supporting them, making space for their dreams. I did all that. I don't regret it. But," Logan asked, "but somewhere along the way, I stopped existing in the story. I became a footnote, the person who always understood, always compromised." Logan dipped his toes slightly in the water, creating soft circles. "When was the last time he asked how you felt?" "I don't remember," John said. "Not really." Logan exhaled. "That's the kind of forgetting that hurts the most." John leaned back on his hands. The air was warm, but his skin felt cold. "What about you?" he asked. "You said you left home for a while." Logan nodded. "Yeah, I needed space." "From what?" "My mom doesn't talk anymore. Not in ways that matter. After the divorce, she just shut down. Like if she didn't acknowledge it, it couldn't be real. But I could feel the tension all the time. Like being in a house where someone's always about to yell, but never does." John turned slightly to face him. "That's exhausting." "It is," Logan said. "And it got worse after I came out." She didn't say anything cruel. She just stopped looking me in the eye. Like she didn't know what to do with me anymore. John felt a sharp sting in his chest. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be," Logan replied. "You didn't make her afraid of me." There was a long pause. "I think that's what hurt the most," Logan added. "Not the yelling, not the awkward questions, just that emptiness. Like I was something fragile or shameful. Like I'd gone from being her son to being a problem she couldn't fix." John's voice was quiet. "You're not a problem." Logan looked at him. "Neither are you." John blinked hard. He wasn't prepared for how much those words mattered. They sat in silence again, not because they ran out of things to say, but because saying them all at once would have made the truth spill too fast. Logan spoke first this time. "Do you ever wonder if the version of love we're taught to want isn't the one we actually need?" John tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "We chase the big gestures, the milestones, moving in, anniversaries, photos. But what if all I ever really wanted was to be chosen, without hesitation, without convenience?" John considered that. "I think I confused routine for commitment." Logan nodded. "Yeah, I think I confused silence for safety." The water below them reflected thin strands of moonlight. Neither of them looked up. "Do you still love him?" Logan asked softly. John didn't answer immediately. "That's the wrong question. What's the right one? Does he still see me?" John said. Logan didn't respond. He didn't need to. A plane passed overhead. Somewhere, someone was arriving, or leaving, or just passing through. The world didn't stop for heartbreak. Logan's shoulder brushed lightly against John's. The contact wasn't intentional, just the result of closeness and stillness. John didn't pull away. He spoke again, voice almost a whisper. I thought if I held on long enough, things would go back to how they were. That if I loved hard enough, I'd be loved back the same way. But now I think I was holding on to a memory, not a person. Logan nodded. Sometimes we're more in love with the version of them we built in our heads than the one sitting in front of us. That's what scares me, John said. Logan looked at him. What? That I've been gone from myself for so long. I don't know what I even want anymore. You want to be seen, Logan said. You want someone who listens when you're not speaking. John felt the lump in his throat grow. I came here because I didn't know who to talk to, Logan added. Because I needed to be somewhere that didn't smell like resentment. I didn't expect to talk to anyone. But then you sat down. I wasn't trying to be saved, John said. Me neither, Logan replied. I just didn't want to vanish quietly. John turned toward him fully now. You didn't. They looked at each other then, really looked. Not at faces or features, but at the shape of presence. Two people caught in the in-between, not strangers anymore, but not quite something else either. Just two lives intersecting at the right, wrong moment. I don't want anything from you, Logan said. But if tonight you need someone to remind you that you're still here, I can be that. John swallowed. The weight of what he'd been carrying felt lighter. Not gone, but less cruel. Can I sit with you a little longer? He asked. You're already here, Logan said. And they stayed. The night didn't ask anything from them. No promises. No resolutions. Just breath. Just space. Just truth. And for the first time in months, John felt real again. John woke to sunlight slicing through the blinds in narrow, quiet beams. The room was still. Too still. He blinked against the light and instinctively turned toward the other side of the bed. Empty. The space beside him was cold, untouched. Logan was gone. No sound. No movement. Just a folded napkin resting on the nightstand. The same kind they'd used the night they met. John reached for it, hands unsteady but careful, as if opening it too fast might undo something delicate. In faint pencil, just 4 words. You reminded me I matter. He stared at the message, holding it like something rare. Not romantic, not dramatic, just honest. He folded it again, slowly, and slid it into his pocket. Then he sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, doing nothing but breathing. There was no heartbreak, no panic, no regret, just stillness, and the sense that something invisible had shifted. When he left the room, he passed the front desk and asked if the boy in 411 had checked out. The clerk didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. Very early. Around sunrise. John nodded. He didn't ask where Logan went or if he left a message beyond the one in his pocket. Some answers didn't need chasing. He returned to his floor and stood outside the door to his original room, his and Alex's. He hesitated before opening it, like he needed one last moment to prepare. When he finally pushed the door open, Alex was at the table, hunched over his laptop, half-finished coffee beside him. John stepped inside and closed the door quietly. Alex looked up. You didn't come back last night. John didn't answer right away. He walked to the other side of the room and pulled out a chair across from him. I needed space, he said simply. Alex leaned back, eyebrows raised. From me? From the silence, John replied. Alex closed the laptop halfway, sensing something unusual in the tone. Okay, he said. You want to talk? John met his eyes. Yeah, I do. Alex folded his arms, waiting. I can't do this anymore, John began. Not like this. Not the way we've been living. Alex blinked, caught off guard. What are you talking about? I mean the pretending, the quiet drift, the way we sit across from each other every day and still feel miles apart. I've been busy, Alex said, defensive now. This launch has been everything. You knew that. I did, John said. But being busy doesn't mean you get to stop seeing me. You stopped listening. You stopped caring. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking for anything. Alex looked down, jaw clenched. So what? One bad trip and you're giving up. John shook his head. This isn't about the trip. This has been building for years. The trip just made it obvious. Alex leaned forward. Did you meet someone? John didn't flinch. Yes. Alex's expression tightened. Did you sleep with him? That's not the point, John said calmly. Then what is? The point is, John said, voice steady, he saw me. He listened. And for the first time in years, I felt like I mattered. Alex leaned back like he'd been struck. I'm not saying this to hurt you, John continued. I'm saying it because I need you to understand what it's like to be in a relationship where you constantly feel like a background character in your own life. Alex looked away. He didn't speak. He didn't argue. He just stared at a spot on the floor, breathing like the air had gotten heavier. John stood up. I'm not asking for an apology, he said. I'm not asking for a fix. I'm telling you I'm done living in silence. Alex's voice came out low. Do you love him? John paused, then shook his head. It wasn't about love. It was about remembering who I am. A long silence followed. Finally, Alex said, so what now? John shrugged. That's up to you. But I won't stay in something that only works when I disappear. He walked to the dresser and opened his suitcase. He didn't rush. He folded his clothes carefully, one piece at a time, the way someone does when they're making peace with a decision they've already made. Alex didn't move, didn't try to stop him. John zipped the bag closed and slipped the napkin into the side pocket. He looked around the room one last time, not for sentiment, but for closure. At the door, he turned back. I loved you, he said. I probably still do. But love without presence isn't enough. And then he left. Downstairs, the morning felt clearer. The city buzzed outside the windows. The hotel lobby came alive with people checking in, checking out, carrying their own stories with them. He didn't know where Logan went. He didn't need to. The boy wasn't the answer. He was the reminder. John stepped into the light, suitcase rolling quietly behind him, and breathed in a morning that didn't ask him to shrink. He didn't know what was next. But for the first time in years, he felt ready to find out. They didn't speak much during checkout. The hotel lobby was busy, filled with the low hum of travelers and the rolling wheels of luggage dragging over polished tile. But to John, everything felt strangely quiet, not around him but inside him, as if the internal noise he'd carried for so long had finally softened into something bearable. Alex stood a few feet away, tapping something on his phone. Not angrily, not impatiently, just detached, the same way he'd been for months, maybe longer. It no longer surprised John. It no longer hurt the way it used to. The front desk clerk handed over the receipt with a polite smile, and John thanked her. He turned to Alex, who was already walking toward the entrance without looking back. For a second, John hesitated, then followed, not out of obligation, but out of finality. Outside, the air was warm and clear. A car waited at the curb, the same one that would take them to the airport, the same one that, just days ago, John thought they would be sharing with hands brushing, shoulders resting lightly together, some quiet memory forming between them. Now they stood apart. Alex opened the back door and slid in first. John stood outside for a moment longer, staring back at the hotel. Not at the building, not at its lights or windows, but at the experience now sitting quietly in his memory. Logan, the napkin, the pool, the voice that said, "You reminded me I matter." He didn't know where Logan went. He hadn't tried to find out. The moment wasn't meant to be followed. It was meant to be honored. John stepped into the car and pulled the door shut. The silence inside wasn't new, but now it had a different texture. It wasn't confusing anymore. It wasn't cruel. It was just honest. They drove through the city without conversation. Palm trees blurred past. The coastline curved in the distance. Alex checked emails. John looked out the window. 15 minutes in, Alex finally spoke. So what happens when we get back? John kept his eyes on the road ahead. I don't know. That's not an answer, Alex said. It's the only one I have, John replied, because I'm not pretending anymore. Alex put his phone down. Are you saying this is over? I'm saying something's already been over. For a while now. Alex exhaled, then rubbed his face with both hands. You met a stranger for one night, and now everything's different? John turned to him. No, everything was different before I met him. That night just made me see it. Alex felt quiet. John leaned back. The hum of the car filled the silence between them. I kept thinking, John continued, that if I held on long enough, worked harder, gave more, eventually we'd find our way back. But love isn't a single-player game. It's not something I can do alone. You think I haven't tried? Alex said. I think you tried once, John replied. But then you stopped. And I didn't notice because I was too busy convincing myself I didn't need to be seen anymore. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The city faded behind them. The airport came into view ahead, glass and steel and structure. Alex finally said, "You never said you were unhappy." "I didn't know how," John answered. "And by the time I figured it out, it felt like you'd already moved on. You just forgot to pack your things." The car pulled up at the terminal. The driver opened the trunk and stepped aside. Alex grabbed his suitcase and waited. John stayed seated. Alex looked back. "You coming?" John shook his head. "I'm staying." "What?" John looked at him. "I booked another night. Just one. I'm not running. I just need to end this in a way that makes sense to me." Alex stared at him. "And then what?" "I'll go home," John said. "But not to keep pretending." Alex didn't respond. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe he finally understood. Without another word, he turned and walked inside. John sat in the car for a few more seconds, then tapped the driver on the shoulder and asked to be taken back. The hotel room they gave him this time was smaller. It didn't matter. He left his bag on the chair and walked down to the lounge. Ordered coffee. Sat in the same corner where he'd first seen Logan sketching on a napkin. The chair across from him was empty now, and yet it didn't feel lonely. It felt full, like something meaningful had once occupied that space and left a kind of imprint. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the napkin, unfolded it gently. "You reminded me I matter." John traced the handwriting with his thumb. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just breathed deeply, the way people do when they're finally steady. He thought about how long he had settled for presence without attention, routine without affection. He thought about how long he'd made himself small, quiet, adaptable. Not because Alex had asked him to, but because he believed that's what love required. But love, real love, isn't about fading. It's about staying visible. Logan didn't change his life. He reminded John he had one. And presence, he now understood, is a choice. Not a default. Not a duty. A choice. That evening, John walked down to the pool one last time. He sat at the edge, legs dipped into the cool water. No one else was there. The breeze was soft. The sky bruised with twilight. He thought of everything that had happened, and everything that hadn't. He thought of what it meant to begin again, not with someone else, but with yourself. For years, John had asked for very little and expected even less. He had waited quietly for permission to feel valued, to be remembered. But now, for the first time, he was giving himself that permission. No anger, no regrets, just truth. The next morning, he checked out early. He walked out of the hotel alone, shoulders back, suitcase in hand. Not broken, not healed, just present. And that was enough. He didn't know what the future looked like, but he knew one thing for sure. He was never going back to the quiet where no one listened. And whatever came next, it would be something chosen, not endured.